Day 4 of the Critérium du Dauphiné will arrive in Burgundy, France today, with Bradley Wiggins starting the day in the yellow jersey with a single-second advantage over Cadel Evans, who really would like to know how Andy Schleck's form is. They'll all take a back seat today as the sprinters will take advantage of the final last flat run into the finish. The Epic Cycle Series presented by Michelob Ultra continues today as we move into the very heart of Burgundy, a region of France well known for its Châtel and, of course, its wines. Hello, everybody. As we look at stage 3 today from Givors to Clayette, 104 miles of racing. I'm Paul Sherwin. Alongside me is Bob Roll. And Bob, this is a very difficult day for the guys who want to win this bike race overall because they have to hand over responsibility to the sprinters.
Well, ideally for our overall contenders, it will be hidden amongst the wheels and sheltered in the peloton. Not a day off exactly, but try to conserve as much energy as possible for the big mountains and the time trials to come.
Well, Bradley Wiggins starts the day in that yellow jersey, knowing that at the end of the day, he could be starting in the time trial tomorrow as last man because he still has a single-second advantage over Cadel Evans, still 2 seconds over Andre Grivko, Carlos Paredo 4th, Tony Martin 5th, all of the big men at the top of the overall standings. Now, although today's map looks a little bit easier, Bob, there's still a fair amount of climbing, not an easy day.
A lot of climbing early on, 167 total kilometers, 104 miles. There's 3 categorized climbs out on the race course. 2 category 4s, that's the lowest points available. 1 category 3 right out of the blocks, and a feed zone about halfway through, but it does flatten out in the last 45 miles of racing, which should take just under 2 hours total time.
Well, that's the way it should work out. And as we go straight to the action here, just inside of 36 kilometers to go, I can tell you that these 2 riders that we're looking at, this is Luis Angel Mate. He is in a breakaway with Egoy Martinez. They broke clear. Martinez is the rider in the orange jersey there of Euskaltel Euskadi. They broke clear at the first kilometer of the bike race here this afternoon. In fact, they built themselves a maximum advantage at one stage of around about 6 minutes. But, Bob, in the main field, a lot of the teams of the sprinters have used an awful lot of energy to make sure these guys did not get too much of a lead.
Well, the team Argos Shimano brings one of the fastest men in bike racing today, John Degenkolb, winner of 2 stages in last year's Dauphiné, but they have to catch the breakaway if Degenkolb is going to have a chance to win the sprint.
I have to say, Bob, we've been to the Dauphiné many, many times in the past. I can't remember in history when there's been so few flat stages in the Dauphiné. It's such a mountainous course this year.
Well, Degenkolb himself won 2 stages, presumably not as many mountains as would need be for him to be able to be competitive in the bike race. This year's Dauphiné, a little bit different than years past. Absolutely the most mountainous of the week stage races, I think, in the whole of the season this year.
Almost a day off as well, you could say, Bob, for Team Sky, because there they are sitting in the second row. You can see all the teams riding very, very closely together. But it is interesting to see that also FDJ have done a lot of pacemaking at the front. They've got a young sprinter, just 21 years of age, Nasser Bouhani. He was hoping to get the stage victory the other day. I think they'll put a lot of responsibility onto his shoulders today.
Well, in stage 1, he did win the field sprint. Unfortunately for the FDJ squad and Bouhani, there was 3 men off the front, including Cadel Evans, who won the stage. Better luck, perhaps, on today's stage for the FDJ squad.
Well, if you ever come to France and you want to order off the menu, that is what you need to order, because that is the very famous Charolais beef you can see just on the far side. And this is the region that we're heading into now. This is the Burgundy region of France. Bob, made very, very famous for its wines.
Oh, the wines of Burgundy, some of the very best produced year in and year out across the globe. People come from all over the world to visit this region and taste the fine wines of Burgundy.
We're talking about the sprinters in this bike race, Bob, because this is basically very much what the French would call a transitional stage. We're moving away from the Ardèche and Burgundy, heading now to line up for that very, very important individual time trial tomorrow, and then 3 days of massive climbing in the Alps.
Well, a very long time trial, 53 kilometers. One thing the Dauphiné has done in recent years is replicate what the peloton will face in the upcoming Tour de France. The Tour de France has a couple of long time trials, one 52 kilometers into the town of Chartres, just just before the last day in Paris. So the Dauphiné is using a long time trial to test these athletes and get ready for the Tour de France. That's why the Dauphiné is used by a lot of the pre-race favorites of the Tour to get ready for the Grand Boucle, the Tour de France, later in the summer.
Well, looking at the rider in this red shirt here, this is Luis Angel Mate. He's earned himself a nickname as the Andalusian Lynx because he likes to pounce into breakaways, but he's never been very successful. He only has 2 victories to his career, 28 years of age. As we look at the beautiful region of France we're coming into now, Egoy Martinez, on the other hand, Bob, he's been a professional since 2002. Both of these riders have only ever won 2 races in their careers, but Martinez's first victory was the Tour de l'Avenir back in '03, which indicated we thought he would be a Tour de France contender.
Well, he's done the Tour 8 times. He's had some success in the Tour de France. Does have a stage win in the Vuelta a España in '06. And he was also king of the mountains in the Vuelta a España and did wear that polka dot jersey in the Tour de France a few years ago for 4 days. Luis Mate, stage win in the Ruta del Sud last year. Tour of San Luis, that was won by Levi Leipheimer this spring. Luis Mate got a stage win in that also in his career.
Good job you bring up the mountains there, Bob, because in fact Giovanni Bernardo has been very busy out on the course, and over the first 3 climbs of the day he earned himself enough points to regain the lead in the King of the Mountains jersey tonight when this state race finishes, as long as he finishes, of course, within the time limit at the end of the day. So as we leave the 2 leaders, we'll take a very short break, and when we come back we will think about the men who have to come out tomorrow and play in the individual time trial. Cadel Evans, who's already proved that he's a very fast man, and of course Bradley Wiggins. Well, welcome back now to this stage of the Dauphiné, and for the sprinters it's a very big day. We're here with the leaders, 30 kilometers to go. That's 18 miles at 1 minute and 47 seconds. Looking at those riders in the orange jerseys, Bob, just reminds me that this is one of the most aggressive teams when we go to the mountains, and it's nice to know that they've just announced that they will in fact extend their sponsorship for another 3 years. It's a team which is basically built up for the development of Basque cycling, a huge hotbed of cycling in the northern part of Spain. In fact, one of their best riders, Sammy Sanchez, is still in the bike race. We were told by Race Radio yesterday that he pulled out with an injury to his ribs, but in fact he soldiered his way through, finished the stage, because he realizes how important it is for his Tour de France preparation and of course his defense of the Beijing Olympics.
Euskaltel coming into the sport way back in 1994, 21 years at the end of the sponsorship deal that they just signed. The men in orange bring out the Basque fans in the Tour de France. They're very aggressive. That man, Egoy Martinez, in the breakaway, the king of the mountain in the Dauphiné just 2 years ago in 2010. A steady team rider and also very proficient in the breakaways, a very powerful rider.
Bob, just looking at the main field here, I would have to think that the peloton today are actually playing around like a cat plays with a mouse, with those 2 riders in the breakaway this afternoon. Once they saw the gap moved up very quickly in the early part of the race, they pegged it, and they've pegged those 2 riders ever since, because there are so many, well, there are no renowned sprinters in this race, but a lot of the young sprinters who would like to have a bit of glory. Guys like John Degenkolb, 23 years of age. He won 2 stages here last year. Of course, Lee Howard, the Australian, 22. Michael Matthews, 21. All the young bloods, the young sprinters we'll talk about a lot for years to come.
Well, John Degenkolb from the Argos Shimano team. No GC threats in this race, so to get something out of it, they have one chance only. That's today's stage, so he'll see his teammates on the front. Keep that gap reasonable. It's only 1 minute and 38 seconds with 30 kilometers to go, about 18 miles of racing. There's the champion of Japan, Hiroyuki Doi, coming to the front. He's done a lot of work to keep Degenkolb in position to win today's stage.
Well, in fact, John Degenkolb, Bob, after the stage the other day that was won by Cadel Evans, he said that he actually had a flat tyre on the run in towards the finish, and if he hadn't had that flat tyre, he reckons his team would have pulled back that leading breakaway of 3. He didn't say he would have won the stage, but reckons he would have had a very good chance.
Most certainly, he won 2 stages in the Dauphiné last year. On that occasion, racing for the lamented HTC Hyro squad. They're out of the sport, but all of their athletes have found positions on other teams, and Degenkolb has found himself on the Argos team, Shimano team, along with his teammate Marcel Kittel, a part of the dynamic duo of sprinters on the Argos Shimano squad, looking for a stage win on today's stage number 3 of the Dauphiné.
Yeah, that's why Argos Shimano have done so much pacemaking at the front end of the main field, and they've got a lot of confidence in John Degenkolb. He's pretty much told the team, Bob, if they can bring it all together at the end of today, he's got a very good crack at a victory, but there'll be a lot of other young riders trying to beat him to the line.
A few fast sprinters. Let's talk about Lee Howard. He's got a good chance. Jonathan Cantwell, in the absence of J.J. Hayedo from the Saxo Bank squad, one of the few winners on the Saxo Bank team so far this year. J.J. Hayedo found the going in yesterday's mountainous stage way too tough. They blasted out of the start house yesterday's stage. Bradley Wiggins himself in the breakaways and some very tough Category 2 climbs that were the undoing of J.J. Hayedo. But Jonathan Cantwell was able to get to the finish line, so Saxo Bank might be able to count on Cantwell to get the victory today.
Little chat going on at the front there between Yukihiro Doi and the rider from FDJ. I wonder what that little discussion was all about. These are the two teams, Bob, that have done the majority of the pacemaking. Now, if you look in second position, you can see a blue and yellow jersey there. That, in fact, is Alexandra Chukchuk, and he's the national champion of Ukraine, both in the road race and in the individual time trial.
Peloton sweeping through the flatter portion of today's stage, getting ready for the presumed field sprint at the back of the field. Courageous riding by the man second from the end. That's Dan Martin, the Irish professional, hoping to do for the first time in his career the Tour de France. But on stage number 1, a dramatic crash very near the finish line at high speed. Absolutely tore his back to shreds, but he's soldiering on. He knows that he needs to get through this stage race in order to be fit and maybe even just make the team of the Garmin Barracuda squad.
Well, he's never been to the Tour de France before, unlike his very famous uncle Stephen Roche, who won the Tour de France in 1987. He's hoping to ride his way through the Dauphiné, get into the mountains and get himself selection for the Tour de France in July. That is how important a race like the Critérium du Dauphiné is in the lead-up and the build-up to the Tour de France and the team's selection to get into those last 9 riders. Bear in mind, you could have 25 or 30 riders on some of these professional teams, and only 9 men can go through to the Tour de France. The two leaders now go past the 25-kilometre to go mark. Their advantage, a minute 25. Tomorrow, the Epic Cycle Series presented by Michelob Ultra continues with Stage 4, the individual time trial, the Race of Truth at the Critérium du Dauphiné. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the NBC Sports Network. Make sure you don't miss it either, because it is going to be a battle of the stars of the Tour de France in July. It's going to be, to me, probably the most important individual time trial of the year so far. As we look at the two leaders still holding on to a minute 20 seconds, the big contenders, Wiggins, Evans, Andy Schleck. Really, Andy Schleck does have to try himself in that individual time trial to see if he's going to be a Tour de France winner.
Absolutely, Andy Schleck needs to do something better than he's done in recent years in the individual Race of Truth. I think you have to go back to the 2010 Tour de France to see where Andy Schleck showed his true capabilities. He measured Alberto Contador in the last tour stage in the time trial in that 2010 edition in Bordeaux. He hasn't shown much in the individual time trial since then, and maybe tomorrow he'll be able to do something. But Andy Schleck has not proved himself so far in the Dauphiné that he's capable of doing that. He said that he had a bad knee problem, and that was treated last month in Switzerland for a few days, and that he's just starting to feel better and be able to put more pressure on the pedals. But for Andy Schleck, a long road to hoe.
Well, you can just see on the right-hand side with the red, white and blue crash helmet on in the yellow jersey, Bradley Wiggins riding at the front end of the main field, really to make sure that he's not involved in any silly accidents. We are leading up to the Tour de France. We're leading up to a very important individual time trial, but there's a lot of teams now, Bob, believe that their sprinters have got a good chance. In fact, Team Lamprey ISD have come forward because they reckon Yuri Krivtsov could be the man for them to try and get across the line in first place.
And what about Tony Gallopin? He was third on the stage yesterday. He leads the white jersey competition. Pretty handy sprint against Danny Moreno. Didn't quite come up with the goods. He said he might have started a little bit too late, but he had a tremendous dash to the line and was able to, for the Radio Shack squad, get third on the stage. And when you consider how poorly Andy Schleck has been riding, it's been one of the rare bright spots for their program in this race so far, the Dauphiné.
Well, you might just have seen that man scuttling up in the black and white jersey there of Radio Shack Nissan Trek there. He's got a lot of bottles in the back. That is Jaroslav Popovic, and in fact, Tony Gallopin said that he was put in an ideal position in that sprint the other day by Jaroslav Popovic, but he just couldn't quite finish it off against Danny Moreno.
Danny Moreno, a tremendous dash to the line for Moreno. He's the measure at times of Joaquin Rodriguez, his more famous teammate. Rodriguez, almost winner of the Giro d'Italia, but faltered in the final stage of the race. The individual time trial was beaten by Canadian rider Hejadal from the American Garmin Barracuda squad. A brilliant result for the Garmin program.
That's Steve Morabito there, just taking on bottles for BMC Racing, the Swiss-sponsored American cycling team of the Australian rider Cadel Evans, who's the defending champion at the Tour de France. Steve Morabito, by the way, was a member of the squad that helped Cadel Evans win the Tour de France last year.
You can't win the Tour without a great team, and Steve Morabito, one of the stalwarts of the BMC program, and one of the local riders. BMC, a Swiss bicycle company, but what a program they have. George Hincapie has been hired, TJ Van Garden to help Cadel in the mountains of the Tour de France. Of course, Thor Hushovd and Philippe Gilbert also in their numbers. And who makes the Tour team? That will be very, very instructive. All for Cadel Evans, the defending champion of the Tour de France, has been in the papers throughout the run-up to the Tour de France so far this year.
Oh, a nice smooth walk ride around that corner. The FDJ, the Française de Jeu, are riding on the front end of this main field, Bob, for their sprint. He's a new kid, 21 years of age. He's had 2 wins so far this year, including a stage of the Circuit of Lorraine. Nasser Bouhanni. Now, I wouldn't like to get involved with a little bit of argy-bargy with him down towards the end, because actually as a junior, he was a boxer, and he still boxes in the winter to keep his base body form right up there.
Well, yes, cyclists shouldn't box with anybody. It's a sport with a lot of leg power, but the spindlier the arms, the better for the cyclists is the general rule. So let's hope that none of the cyclists are involved in any boxing in today's stage.
Well, you know, one guy who a lot of people have forgotten about as a good sprinter is Gerhard Scholich. Now, we saw him ride on the finishing circuit around Los Angeles. He actually wasn't riding for himself. He was trying to get the victory for Tom Boonen on that final stage, but he ended up getting onto the podium right outside the LA Live. Now, he's the kind of guy who could have a chance today.
Well, here in the absence of their sprinter, Tom Boonen, Gerhard Scholich should be able to take his chances. He's done a lot of work for Tom Boonen in the sprints so far this year, but Gerhard Scholich, a very fast man himself. And when your top sprinter is not in the race, this might be the only chance you have throughout the year to get a stage win, and it's highly coveted for all the professional cyclists. It's all about the wins.
Well, at 21 kilometers to go, the gap now coming down to 1 minute and 4 seconds. That's just about 13 miles of racing. Egor Martinez, no stranger to long breakaways like this, but Bob, it has to come back to the sprint down towards the end, especially probably for the sprinter from Argos Shimano, John Degenkolb.
12 miles to go, 1 minute and 2 seconds the advantage, well in hand for the peloton. Virtually impossible for 2 men to stay away. The fatigue starts to creep into the legs. They've been out in the breakaway since the very first kilometer, and once the inertia of the peloton takes over, especially on the flat roads, it's lights out for the breakaway 99 out of 100 times.
Over on the right-hand side there, you've got the black and blue jerseys of Team Sky. They're looking after them and Bradley Wiggins. But this man, I reckon, is the big sprinter for today, John Degenkolb. He's 121st in the overall standings, but that's not what he's worried about. He's worried about individual wins. And at 23 years of age, he's already had 5 wins, Bob, so far this season. So our Michelob Ultra Athlete profile today is, of course, John Degenkolb, who we discovered really last year at the Critérium du Dauphiné.
Also 5th in Milano San Remo, the one-day classic in Italy that's nearly 300 kilometers long. Tremendous endurance John Degenkolb possesses. Also an incredibly wicked kick to the finish line when he has a chance for a stage win.
Yeah, 300 kilometers, that's 180 miles. It's a long day in the saddle, as we can see the organization at the front end of the main field, the urgency. For the sprinters, it is so much pressure today, Bob, because for Degenkolb's team, it's the only chance. But for the other guys as well, for Scholich, the man we talked about, Bouhanni of FDJ, Lee Howard of Australia, Sebastian Yeo, all guys have got one chance left of a stage victory in the Dauphiné this year, because tomorrow's the individual time trial. They've got no chance, and after that we are into the Alps.
Big mountains to finish off the Dauphiné this year. 3 stages in the high mountains above tree line. That's to give the GC contenders for this race and the Tour de France a chance to spread their wings and fly. But today it's about the sprinters and the Argo squad on the front, controlling the tempo. This will have 2 effects. They'll be able to catch the breakaway. They'll also keep their sprinter in the right position throughout the remaining miles in the race to keep him with a chance to win the stage.
It's important to make sure that you catch the breakaways at the right time and still have enough firepower in the team to control the speed of the main field as you come into the final sprint into the town today of La Clayette. And it's a very tricky sprint with a nasty little roundabout at 1.3 kilometers to go. We'll take a short break and be back with more action. So as we look now at the main field, Bob, look at that gap. All of a sudden, it's gone out of the window. 13 seconds, and there they are. It's all done by the shouting. These guys tried. They escaped after a kilometer. Very shortly, they're back with their mates.
Well, it shows you how intense the battle for position is within the peloton, gobbling up the road in front of them. Not concerned so much with the breakaway. They do have to catch that. Plenty of miles left to do that. But I think that the tempo and the inertia is being initiated because of everybody wanting to be in the front of the group to have a chance at the sprint. So all the sprinters teams will come forward. All the GC contenders teams will also come forward to keep their men out of trouble. Bradley Wiggins, a perfect example of that. He's in the yellow jersey on the left-hand side of the peloton, only 5 wheels from the front of the group. And with 9 miles to go, that's the perfect place to be.
Well, Bob, I've got down around about 10 guys who I reckon can sprint very well out of a pack like this. They're all youngsters. Which is the strongest team, do you reckon, right now to be able to get the organised train down towards the run-in La Clayette?
You got to give the advantage to the Argos team, dedicated John Degenkolb 100%. All of his teammates will sacrifice everything they're capable of to keep him out of the wind and in the right position to unleash his sprint within sight of the finish line, which comes very close from the end. So a lot of intuitive lead-out will need to be done by his teammates to give him a chance in the finale of today's stage.
Well, everybody now getting very, very nervous. We're inside of 15 kilometers. That's inside of 10 miles of racing. He's done a great job, the Japanese champion here, all day, Yukihiro Doi. He will not be part of the lead-out train towards the end. He's setting this tempo to prevent any attacks. There's the champion of France over on the right-hand side as well in the blue, red and white. That, of course, Sylvain Chavanel. On the opposite side in the yellow, there is Bradley Wiggins, making sure that if there's any dodgy run-ins towards the finish line, he is away from danger. And there's a nasty cobbled roundabout, Bob, at 1,300 meters to go. Now, that could be the scene of a bit of excitement.
Well, that will definitely provide some excitement for us. Hopefully not in the wrong sense of the word, in the right sense. But Team Sky bringing an incredible squad to the Dauphiné this year. That man, Christian Knies, former champion of Germany, on the front of the peloton. But they also have Chris Froome, second in the Vuelta a España last year. Edvald Boasson Hagen, one of the very best professionals in the world. Knies, I mentioned. Danny Pate, the American, and teammate of Wiggins in the Tour de France last year. Richie Porte, Michael Rogers, and Konstantin Zivsov. What a squad Sky brings to the Dauphiné. They're taking this race very seriously.
Over on the left, a little peeping through there of the green jersey. That, of course, is Cadel Evans. He's being moved up to the front. Giovanni Bernardo, not quite sure what he's doing. He's to be the new polka dot jersey as the leader of the King of the Mountains tonight, and he went out and grabbed 2 third places on the mountains here this afternoon to get himself 3 points to put himself back in the lead in that competition. He's been a professional for 8 years, by the way, and a lot of people do say probably a lot thanks to Dad, because Jean-René Bernardo is the owner of that team.
Good story about the Bernardo family. Some question as to whether or not they would even have a sponsor. They found Europcar, and they were led in the Tour de France last year by Thomas Voeckler, that spent 9 days in the yellow jersey, and it was a great Tour de France for that squad. I'm sure Europcar is thankful to the Bernardo family for keeping that squad going.
Well, in fact, to add on to that story, Bob, in fact, Thomas Voeckler had already decided to move to a different team, and it was only Thomas Voeckler's return back to that squad that allowed Europcar to actually complete the contractual agreements. As we can see, the beautiful town of Châteauneuf just in the back there, that in fact is the nice church of St. Peter and Paul. This is a beautiful part of France here this afternoon, but that is impressive speed that we can start to see in the main field now, because they're starting to wind it up. They're starting to get a little bit nervous. All of the sprinters are thinking about their chance, where they're going to make the move. And on a day like this, a lot of these guys, Bob, have not actually had a chance to see what the finish is like. And I can tell them there's a sweeping right-hand bend at around about 2 kilometers to go. Then there's a little bit of a cobblestone section at 1.3 kilometers to go. And then the road bears all the way around to the left. You don't really see the finishing line until the final few meters.
Well, that's a good point you bring up. All of these riders, a lot of them younger professionals, haven't had a chance to see the run into every town, every road in Europe. They will have to depend on their team managers. And for a guy like Bradley Wiggins, you can see right in the middle of your screen in the yellow jersey, he depends on Sean Yates. He's in the team car, calling out the orders, telling riders what to be aware of, what to keep in their back of their mind as alerts along the race course. And Sean Yates has probably done every road in Europe about 50 times, at least, if not on his bicycle, in the team car as well.
Well, the big advantage now is a lot of riders, they use satellite imagery to look at the run-in towards the finish as well, to be able to explain just exactly how the race is going to unfold. And we won't see it on the run-in towards the finish today, Bob, but 4 kilometers from the finishing town of La Clayette, there's a small town called Le Guidon, which in cycling, in French, means the handlebars. And that's the small town where Bernard Thévenet was born. He was the winner of the Tour de France in 1975 and 1977, and the first man really to dethrone Eddy Merckx.
He took Eddy Merckx's chance to win his 6th Tour de France away. Eddie Merckx could be excused, though. A fan jumped out of the melee, punched Eddie Merckx, and injured his ribs and his kidneys as well. And Eddie Merckx was third at the end of that Tour de France. It was Joop Zoetemelk, the famous Dutchman, who was second in the Tour de France way back in 1975. But this is the roads that Bernard Thévenet grew up riding, and you can imagine how delightful they must have been and still are to this day.
Yeah, in fact, Thévenet, although he lives in Grenoble nowadays, he's part of the organisation of this, and he's the race director of the Critérium du Dauphiné, and probably one of the reasons why we're going not too far away from his hometown. Now, Team Sky there over on the left-hand side, they're getting themselves organised. Now, look at Bradley Wiggins there in third position. He doesn't want to lose any time. Isn't it funny, Bob? A complete change from the Bradley Wiggins who said, I don't really want the yellow jersey because I want to wear my special skin suit for the individual time trial. A skin suit that has been designed for the Tour de France and, of course, more importantly, maybe this year for the individual time trial at the Olympic Games.
Olympic Games coming up on Bradley Wiggins' horizons, also the Tour de France. He crashed out in last year's Tour on stage number 7 with a broken collarbone. Thought it was maybe a little bit of a tactical blunder for Team Sky to have the whole team wait for Bradley Wiggins. They didn't have a rider to compete in the overall standings. Their man, Edvald Boasson Hagen, came up with a stage win later on in the Tour de France to reverse those fortunes that Bradley Wiggins took away with a broken collarbone, crashing out of the Tour de France last year. And you got to wonder, does that give him some extra incentive to be successful in this year's Tour? So far this season, he has been on fire, winning Paris-Nice and Tour of Romandy leading into the Dauphiné.
Well, he's been perfect. He hasn't put a wheel mark wrong so far this year, has he, Bradley Wiggins? Everything has gone right. He's come out every time he's wanted to, not to participate in a race, but to race the race. And that's the most important thing that he is racing. He wants to win the Dauphiné. When he won the Dauphiné last year, he was the first Briton to do it since Brian Robertson way back in the 1960s.
1960s, you have to go a long ways back. The United States, we have to go back a ways. Also, Lance Armstrong won the Dauphiné, one of the few men to win the Dauphiné and the Tour de France in the same year. Bradley Wiggins looking to do that last year, but like I said, crashing out of the Tour, denied that opportunity. You'll have to see him stay a little bit closer to the front of the field if he wants to avoid the bad luck that plagues international cycling on the run-ins to these big bunch gallops.
Right, look at this now, 10 kilometers, 6 miles to go. And in fact, talk about turning the tables. I've just noticed that Tony Martin, who is a man trying to win this bike race, he's in the pale blue jersey there, just on the far side. He's actually looking after his team sprinter here this afternoon, and that, of course, Gerard Cholek. And look here, as we can see BMC Racing moving the green jersey Cadel Evans up to the front end of the main field. He too wants to make sure that if there's going to be any split in the field on the run in towards the finish, he's in front of that split.
FDJ controlling the tempo, setting things up for Boani, their sprinter. Also queued up right behind them, the Quick Step squad of Tony Martin and BMC with Cadel Evans in the green jersey as the points leader, also in the action. Let's see, Bradley Wiggins moving up on the out-hand side, on the left-hand side of the peloton there, following his two teammates.
Everybody now is getting themselves organized. They're looking for teammates. They're looking for the wheel to follow because they want to make sure that they get themselves sorted out, because next we'll be charging into the finish at Clayette. Welcome back. This is the finale now. 6.5 kilometers to go, 4.5 miles. You've got the pale blue jerseys of Omega Pharma Quick Step getting themselves sorted out for Gerard Cholek. Still FDJ never very far away from the front. They're thinking their youngster, 21-year-old Nasser Bouhanni, could be the winner here this afternoon. But everybody moving up the left-hand side, the right-hand side, trying to find themselves in the right position to start the sprint. But you don't want to go to the front, Bob, too soon.
Not too soon, not too late. You got to time it perfect. We saw Cadel Evans take an opportunity on stage number 1. Danny Moreno, yesterday's stage, perfect timing. Came to the front just in the last couple of 100 meters, was able to win the stage. Hats off to Cadel Evans. He puts his teammates on the front. They sacrifice their chances to keep him out of trouble, and he delivers the wins. Great riding by the BMC squad. I'm really happy to see the way they're riding today.
Well, Tony Gallopin, the rider from Radio Shack Nissan, he's actually wearing the white jersey as the best young rider in the race here this afternoon, and he feels this is a good opportunity for him to try and get the victory if he can. You can see the red and black jerseys there looking over their shoulders. They're looking for the likes of Cadel Evans keeping up at the front. Look at Chavanel. He's going to be, I reckon Chavanel is going to be a man to watch when we get into the mountains. But here, the big, long organisation of the men in pale blue. And Tony Martin is a great lead-out man. Remember how he used to lead out Mark Cavendish?
Oh, Tony Martin, one of the best time trialists, along with Fabian Cancellara in the world today. Tony Martin hardly ever loses a time trial anymore. He's come back to good form. He just won the Tour of Belgium that finished a few days before the Dauphiné started after a pretty horrific crash, being plastered by a car in the bike path just 1.5 miles from his house. He's recovered from that broken cheekbone that he had, and he's back up to his top form.
174. Now, this is a shock to me because this is Lee Howard. He's one of the sprinters. He's a world champion on the track, and I was expecting him to be the man to come out of the pack for Green Edge here this afternoon. That is obviously not going to happen. Now, look at the urgency. Look at the excitement now as we get this organisation, the faces, the grimaces of everybody now trying to hold their position in the line. You don't want to touch your brakes at a time like this, because you touch the brakes just for a fraction, you slip back 15 places, and you've got to use all of that energy to move right the way back up again. The orange jerseys have appeared now, and that, of course, is for Michael Matthews.
Michael Matthews, a sprinter of the Rabobank squad. Michael Matthews, consistent winner, had a very good prologue. The indications are good from Michael Matthews, and some of the sprinters now in a little bit of trouble. A tremendous tempo leading up to the finish line. Look at the face of Tony Martin's second wheel. Sylvain Chavanel, the French champion, on the front of the peloton.
Chavat, they call him here in France. Red, white, and blue, the champion de France, as he goes inside of 4 kilometers to go, 2.5 miles. This is a team that's organized. This is a team that knows exactly what they want to do. Also moving up there in the Astana jersey, trying to take advantage of this line, is Boris Bodzik.
Bodzik is the Astana rider. Where's Bradley Wiggins, though? It's a long ways down the line to find the man in the yellow jersey, Bradley Wiggins. That's a little bit too far back. 3 kilometers to go, 1.8 miles before the finish. There is a neutralized section where everybody gets the same time in case of a mishap, but it's much better to stay near the front. That's right where Cadel Evans is. He's about 10th in line. So Evans right now riding well, just 1 second behind Bradley Wiggins at the end of yesterday's stage in the overall standing.
Look at that rider pulling out there. He's done his turn at the front. He's kept his team sprinter up to as far as he can in this peloton. Then all of a sudden you disappear and you cross over the line, seconds or minutes behind everybody else. This, though, is the powerhouse of France, Sylvain Chavanel. He will ride as long and as hard as he can. There are 4 riders there from Omega Quickstep. They've got themselves organized. The 4th rider there is going to be Gerard Scholik. A little bit further back, we can see still the green jersey. But yes, you're right, Bob. I have to say, I think Bradley Wiggins is a little bit too far down. He's over on the right-hand side. He's looking about 20th position. Now, Radio Shack are starting to move up there in the black shoulders there. They'll be looking after a man in a white jersey today, Tony Galopin.
Tony Galopin, he was 3rd yesterday. Unbelievable turn of speed on the front of the peloton by Sylvain Chavanel. We saw him lead out Tom Bonin and Paris-Nice earlier this spring, a very similar situation. They're leading for Gerard Scholik. He's the man 3rd on the road, now 2nd, but what an incredible turn of work by Sylvain Chavanel.
There, I tell you what, he's put some pain into the legs of everybody else here this afternoon. Now the next man to take over is going to be Tony Martin, looking over his shoulder. There is Cholik. Look at this. They've got all of their men left here, right up to the front end of the main field. That's Bosenhagen there for Team Sky in about 5th or 6th position in the black and blue jersey. But it's chaos out there at 2.3 kilometers to go. That's 1.5 miles.
1.5 miles of racing. Gerard Scholik sweeping through the last few corners. A little bit dodgy right there. Tony Martin, 2nd wheel. Stain Vandenberg, he's the man 3rd. He's a great classic specialist. Very fast rider himself. He's got his teammate right on his wheel. Omega Quickstep looking for another win. They've won 34 so far this year, looking for another on today's stage. Scholik, perfect position in 4th wheel.
Oh, this is Deckenkolb. Oh, Bob, this is unbelievable. This is he can't look at it. He's spinning his wheels around. He's had a mechanical problem on the run into the finish. You can see the dejection on his face. He is not a happy man here this afternoon. Well, that opens up the sprint to a lot of guys now to try and get themselves a victory.
The big favorite of the sprint is out of it for today. Here is the lead out. Omega Quickstep has led the proceedings and dominated, and let's see how the end goes. Argus Shimano, that is a real blow to the morale with just over 1 kilometer before the finish.
Tony Martin now on the front, world champion. Oh, there's a move by Philippe Gilbert. We've not seen him all season. There he is, the champion of Belgium now. He's trying to get himself the victory. Clever, crafty little move. He knows about this tricky little roundabout with 1.3 kilometers to go. Can he do it?
Philippe, don't look back. Keep plowing towards the finish line. A good gap there. 1 kilometer, 1.3, just over a kilometer before the finish line. About 1,000 yards to go. And a good attack by Philippe Gilbert. Out of nowhere comes Gilbert, the BMC rider, throwing caution to the wind. Let's see who can chase him. In last year's season, nobody could catch Philippe Gilbert once he got this far ahead.
1,000 meters to go, 60 seconds to get to the finish line. This, of course, you can see now is Philippe Gilbert. Yes, he is back, and we will see Philippe Gilbert fighting at the Tour de France, I reckon, this year. They haven't yet rattled the cage of Omega Quickstep, but they're down to one last man. Ooh, and Gerard Cholik has been left a long way to go to the front end of this field. There's not many men in the world, Bob, can surprise and make it feel like this, but here, Philippe Gilbert, champion of Belgium, is.
He might be the only one capable of staying away from a big bunch gallop. Here's the inertia now. Here's the lead out going. Matthews coming into the frame with his Rabobank teammate, and Radio Shack leading out for the man in the white jersey on second wheel. That is Tony Galopin.
As Popovic is doing the pacemaking, they've caught the champion of Belgium. Now they're starting to line up for the finishing line. They're over there. Cholik is in about second position in the pale blue there. The sprint is starting to open up. This must be Roger Klug. Oh, there's a crash. They've gone down there. Somebody's gone down there. You've got Michael Matthews in with a spill coming through. Is Bosenhagen. Gerard Cholik is in the pale blue, but Bosenhagen has come out of nowhere to get that one. Wow, I don't know who went down there, Bob, but he went down very, very hard indeed. That's a win for Team Sky, and I would not have expected that one.
Wiggins weaving his way through the chaos there. It looked like a Euskaltel rider, perhaps one of the Radio Shack men as well, going down within sight of the finish line, but nobody could be faster than Edvald Boasson-Hagen coming out of the peloton. He did that in the Tour de France last year, winning one of the stages, stage number 6 it was, and again today, unbelievable ride by Boasson. Timed it to perfection, didn't have any teammates leading him out, but he followed the wheels perfectly, and he had the quickest turn of speed at the end of the race.
Well, Bob, this man is a winner. Whatever he might say about riding for Bradley Wiggins, he likes to win bike races. He's been one of the most successful youngsters coming through on the squad. He just turned 25 just a few days ago before the start of the Critérium du Dauphiné, and I tell you what, he had to ride on his own. The rest of the team are dedicated basically to Bradley Wiggins. Alexander Vinokurov coming across the finishing line again, and I tell you what, that was a very nasty tumble on the run into. That's Gerard Cholik on the left-hand side in the pale, but look at the face of Bosenhagen. Bodog is his nickname with the team. A little bit further back in the orange is Michael Matthews, but that was a very, very dominant victory. That, by the way, is the chateau here of La Clayette, and it was built way back in 1380.
1380, that's an old building, but a new monument to cycling was by Edvald Boasson-Hagen.
Let's have a look at that crash one more time there, Bob. It looked to me as if somebody was taking a few risks, and, you know, they zigzag. And looking, there's a Euskaltel rider over on the left-hand side there, and it looks to me as if he actually touched the curbstone, and then he catapulted into the middle of the main field there. His bike is going upside down the middle of the road, and it looks as if that probably was Ricardo Garcia from Euskaltel Euskadi. And here's confirmation of the result. Cholik was second. Bodzik was up there in third place for Astana. It was Roger Kluger in fourth, and Murillo Fischer was up there for Garmin Barracuda in fifth place. Not bad for a 32-year-old.
And Tony Galopin, the young rider, showing good signs of a fantastic turn of speed in sixth on the stage. Jonathan Cantwell, in the absence of JJ Hayedo, unable to deliver, 10th on the stage.
As Garcia crosses the line here, a lot of questions will be asked tonight around the dinner table at Argos Shimano, because in the finishing straight there, a little bit further back, you can see 3 riders from Argos Shimano coming in, but the next man to cross the line, John Deckenkolb, and I wonder if he would have won. A lot of ifs and buts in the sport of professional cycling. No ifs about this, though. Edvald Bosenhagen will talk to us after the break. Well, as we now look at Edvald Bosenhagen of Norway climbing onto the podium for the 62nd time in his career, and he's only 25 years of age. Bob, for a man who has worked so hard for the team, how about that for a win?
Living, breathing personification of desire. He spent 100+ miles on the front of the group, working to keep his teammate Bradley Wiggins in the yellow jersey. Still has the strength, the speed, and the class to get a stage win for himself. Brilliant riding by Bohag from Norway.
Formerly a big man winning stages for Columbia High Road. 14 wins he had back in 2009. The Road IT Ride of the day today goes to Edvald Boasson-Hagen.
In the blue, white, and black of Team Sky, Bo Hagen starts his sprint with about 150 meters to go. Easily accelerates to the shoulder of Gerard Schiolik, then hits the boosters. Good night, Irene. It's all over, but the teardrops for the rest of the field. Bo Hagen, a great stage win.
A very dominant stage victory by Edvald Boasson-Hagen of Team Sky there as he comes right down through the middle, avoiding all of the crashes and disturbances at the back end of the main field. A clean run at the finish line from the man from Norway, getting himself win number 6 so far this year. That's why he's the Road ID Ride of the Day. He's a man who goes out and gets the wins whenever it's presented to him. He's a great champion from Norway, Edvald Boasson-Hagen, but at the Tour de France, he'll be dedicating himself to Bradley Wiggins. But he talked to us.
Edvald, everybody expected to see maybe Nasser Bouhanni or John Degenkolb to win, but today you won, and for you, that's not a surprise.
Yeah, it was a nice day for the team. We had the yellow jersey, and we didn't really have to work at all, so that was good. And the team did a good job to keep Bradley up in the front, and then I could sit behind, so it's really good. And Degenkolb, he had a flat tire, I think, so then it was one less to sprint against, and I won, not easy, but with a good enough gap, so I'm really happy.
That's a good week for our Sky. Bradley is in yellow and can maybe win this weekend. You win today.
It's a really great, a really strong team, and Bradley in yellow, and I'm here mainly to help him to win the race, but I got the chance today to try to sprint, and then I won, so I'm really happy, and I'm happy to ride for the team. It's a great team to ride for, so cross the fingers for that we keep the yellow jersey the whole week.
I tell you what, Bob, that man, he's a star, isn't he?
He is a superstar of cycling, coveted of all the teams because of his versatility. He can win stages, he's a great time trialist, he's won classics before, and he has no reluctance to help his teammates to be successful as well. He is a gem. And
there's been no change in the overall standings today. On a flat stage, Bradley Wiggins still leading by 1 second ahead of Cadel Evans. All of these figures, I think, will change tomorrow. Carlos Barredo is in 4th place. A little bit further down, Sylvain Chavanel in 7th at 5 seconds. He's a good time trialist, don't forget. Richie Porte at 7 seconds. He's also a very good time trialist. He's in 10th place. A little bit further down, the notables.
TJ Van Garderen looking for 35 seconds. His teammate, George Hincapie, both Americans, 2 minutes down. Andy Schleck, 5:21, 0 hour for Schleck on tomorrow's time trial stage.
Well, this man, he wears a white, red and blue jersey as champion of Great Britain in road racing, but here he's the champion of the Dauphiné because he's got the yellow jersey.
Yellow jersey, another day in yellow. We'll see how that affects him in the aerodynamic discipline of time trialing tomorrow. The yellow jersey gives the boost to the man wearing it. Bradley Wiggins, he's been able to defend his leads throughout the year. See how he does tomorrow. Tomorrow is a big stage for Wiggins as well.
It is, and don't forget you can follow that on the Epic Cycle Series presented by Michelob Ultra as we continue with stage 4 of the individual time trial, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the NBC Sports Network. And tonight, 7:30 Eastern, the NBC Sports Network brings you coverage of the 2012 Stanley Cup Final, Game 4 between the Devils and the Kings. For a full schedule of our cycling, log on to NBCSports.com. Till tomorrow, I'm Paul Sherwin for Bob Roll saying goodbye.